Hello friends, welcome back. Today we're going to build a Markdown previewer. This is part of our front-end libraries projects, which makes up a part of the front-end library certification. So here we're going to build a CodePen app, but we're not going to build a CodePen app. I'm going to do it like I always do. I'm going to make a GitHub Pages one and publish it live to the real internet that is functionally similar to this CodePen. So if we look at this CodePen, we see that there's a Markdown previewer. So there's this editor, and then here, so it says, welcome to my React Markdown previewer. And you see down here, it shows it in what looks like GitHub Markdown. And so if we were to move this, you'll see that it shows up immediately here. And so yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We wanna fulfill the user stories to get all the tests to pass and give it your own style. You can use any mix of HTML, JavaScript, CSS, Bootstrap. That's what we're going to use. I'm not going to use Sass. I don't recommend reusing React or Redux on this. jQuery, we will use jQuery because it's part of Bootstrap. We won't really be writing anything specific in jQuery though. You should use a front-end framework like React. And this section is about learning front-end frameworks. Well, we're going to use Bootstrap. There's no reason to use React on this. Additional technologies not listed above are not recommended and using them is at your own risk. We are looking at supporting other front-end frameworks like Angular and Vue. They are not currently supported. We will accept and try to fix all issues. Happy coding. So here we have user stories. I'm going to do a process called test-driven development to get this process working. So we're going to work through these in an iterative way, meaning we're going to work through them one by one as we work through the tests. You do not need to make the tests pass. My Markdown previewer interprets carriage returns and returns them as break lines. I'm not sure what that means right now. But you can build your project by forking this CodePen project, or you can use a CDN. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use a CDN to link to run the tests in any environment you like. So I'm going to copy this URL here, and once you're done, we're going to submit the URL here. And so this has our old tribute page one that I did in the past. When we're done, we're going to have a github.io link. And so, yeah, let's get started. I'm going to just slide this guy over to the top right. I'm going to open up a terminal window. I'm going to slide that down to the bottom left. And let's see. So first off, I'm going to change directories into the desktop. CD desktop. So that means that I'm on the main desktop. So now I'm going to make a directory. And I'm going to call this one a Markdown previewer. And that shows up that I've created a folder now on my desktop that I can work with. And now I can change directories into the Markdown previewer. And I just put A, and then I hit the tab key, which made it so I jumped right in there. So now if I go PWD, this shows me that I'm in my computer, and then I'm in a Markdown previewer. And if I go ls, there's nothing in it because I listed the files. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is go touch, which means make a file. And I'm going to go index.html. Now, if I list the file, you'll see that the index.html is in there. So now I'm going to say open, and I'm going to select an application. My text editor is called Atom. And then I'm going to open the file name, which is index. So I just put in, and then I hit the tab key. And now if I press enter, Atom should open up. Cool. So now I've got Atom opened up. I've got my index file here, and I can say h1 Markdown previewer by useful programmer. Okay, so now if I save that, and then I can just test to see if now that, and I'll just want to just show you that all I'm doing here is you could do it this way. This was just like a normal way. I could have just right click and say new file and that kind of thing. I'm just using the terminal because it's faster for programming to be comfortable using the terminal. So I like using the terminal in these tutorials. Markdown previewer by useful programmer. So now what do we want to do? We want to see this in our browser. And so I'm going to say open-a, and in here I'm going to say Google Chrome. And then I'm going to open the index. So I've selected the file of Google Chrome. I'm going to keep this in an incognito window because that makes it better, I think it makes it look cleaner for the tutorials. And so in here, we've got Markdown Previewer for a useful programmer. So now we have started. The first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to add Bootstrap. Not bootstrap.com, but bootstrap.org. Nope. Bootstrap 4. Okay, getbootstrap.com. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com and I'm going to go to get started. They've got this quick start JS. They show you how to add it to an existing one, but here they have a starter template and we're just going to copy that. This is not a bad thing to copy. We're using the CDN here, which means we're using outside computers. This would not be the best thing to do if you were starting your own project, but if you were starting a real project to work on, but it's fine for this project because it's a pretty simple one. So I'm going to remove this H1 element that's started there, and I'm just going to replace the starter one with this. And so instead of here, I'm going to say this is the, no, actually I'm not going to do that yet. I want to do everything iteratively. So now if I save this and I come back over to here and we refresh the page, we should see that some things have changed. The font has changed and the size of the font has changed. And now if we were to, now we actually have a lot of things built in. Let's say if I were to open up the console, I can see now if I type in jQuery into the console, it shows up that there's a function there. And this shows me that jQuery is loaded, which is this code here. jQuery was loaded, and the popper and everything was here as well. And so we have a Markdown previewer. We have our title. You see how it says hello world here? I want that to say Markdown previewer by useful programmer. So if I change here, if I change the title, because it's in the head element, it's providing data like that. And so if I save this and I refresh, you can see that now in the title is reflected in the tab of the browser window. And yeah, so I'm going to open this up. I can go Atom and then put a dot to open it up so that I've got the index here. You know, sometimes when you copy and paste into Atom, it get messed up looking like that. So I'll just reopen the window and then we get a clean looking page. Okay, so now that we have Bootstrap loaded into here, we have Bootstrap and jQuery and Popper. jQuery Popper and then Bootstrap JS. So this is the Bootstrap JS, this is Popper, and this is jQuery, and then this is the CSS for jQuery. Once we get that completed, what we want to do is bring in our CDN for the code tests. So I'm grabbing this, and then this guy also has to come down here with these script tags. So I'm going script, just like the last ones, and then I'm going source is equal to, and I'm adding this guy in here, and then I'm closing the script tab. So these are the CDNs for that, and then we're using a CDN for our testing environment. So when I save this and I come back to Markdown Previewer, and I'm going Command, and then you can go Command 1, 2, 3, 4 to cycle through the tabs of your browser. And so now if I refresh this page, now we have our our free code camp test suite information here. And from here, we can run the tests and see if they pass. Okay, cool. Now, one thing I want to do with this is I'm going to do the Bootstrap now. I want Markdown Previewer by Useful Programmer to be on its own row and centered. And then I want a column that splits this in half with one side of where you can type in and one half where you can not type in. So first thing I'm going to do is just get this going. I'm going to use a container. So we're going to go div class is equal to container fluid, and we're going to start the program like that. Now I'm going to tab these out to keep the spacing proper, and if I save this and I refresh, you'll see that it's there. Now container fluid means that the container will reflect depending on how wide your window is. Now if I were to just go container and I refresh, then it reflects, it keeps a maintained sort of distance from the border. Now because we're going to have two kind of big windows here that we want maximum size on, I'm choosing container fluid. And with Bootstrap, we want to create rows. In this one, I want to create 2 rows. I want to create one row where it says Markdown Previewer by Useful Programmer, and then I want the second row to have the 2 columns. One with the Markdown where we write in over here, and one with the preview of the Markdown. And so let's get the rows in there. So I'm going to have 2 rows, right? Div class is equal to row. And I'm going to have 2 rows. And within those rows, I'm going to have different stuff. And now I go div class. We're going to have columns in our row. This one's just going to be a column of 12. So I'm just going to say div class col. And now if I were to refresh the page, you'll see that Markdown Previewer is in its own row. So we've got a row and we've got a column, which shows that there's a little bit of spacing on the side. And then we also have our next row. But because it's empty, you can't see it. And I'm going to add in here a class of text center. This will make it so that my H1 is centered in the page. I could actually go text white. If I save that, it will disappear. But if I can also go background primary. And if I save that, I think it'll make the background blue, which is pretty cool. Let's make it a success, because I think that looks better with this drop-down menu. So we've got a Markdown Previewer by Useful Programmer. And so within this row, we're going to do columns as well. We're going to go div class column, but we're going to create these so that they're 6 each. Because the columns, you're going to have 12 columns on each of your divs. So if you create 2 columns of 6 pieces wide, you're going to get columns that divide it in half. And so now here I'm going to say the editor will be here. And then here I'm going to say the Markdown Previewer will be here. And so now if I refresh the page here, you can see that I've got half windows. And I could go something like background primary and background danger. And that would show you the kind of size of what I'm working with. And so as we fill these in, they'll become more useful. So sweet. Now what we can do is come back over to here, and this kind of gives, I've done some basic Bootstrap for the layout of this. And you'll notice this is mobile responsive, which is cool. So if we were to look at this, Command Alt I, and then go over to here on Google Chrome, we can preview it on the iPhone X and the iPad. And because we're using Bootstrap, this is going to look relatively good, even though we still have work to do. Okay, so I'm going to come back here. The cool thing about having this test suite here is we can run the test, and that'll tell us where to go next. So we're passing 1 of 8 tests. So if I click here, first off, I can see a text area element corresponding with the ID of editor. Okay, so I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to put this guy here so we can see this. A text area element corresponding with editor. Well, I know I want the editor to go here, so I should be able to say in here, I'm going to go text area, and it wants an ID equal to editor. Text area. Cool. So now I'm going to save it on this page, and I'm going to come back over here and refresh this page. Now you can see that there is a text editor here, and I'm going to run the tests. Now we're passing 2, so that means I've got the first one complete. I can see an element corresponding with the ID preview. Preview is not defined. So my guess is preview will be where we want the previewer to be. So I'm going to say I can see an element. I think you can go div if they're wanting to element. ID is equal to preview. So if I save this and refresh over here, it doesn't show up, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're not passing the tests. If I pass the test, run the tests, you see we've got 3 tests passing. This guy, and this guy. Okay, cool. Next one. When I enter text into the editor element, the preview element is updated as I update the display of the text area. Okay, so this is going to be tricky. This means that when we put something into here, ASDF, it shows up here, and that currently isn't happening. So I'm going to come back over here, And look at this guy. In the edited preview element, updated as I type to display the content of the text area. So I can enter GitHub flavored Markdown into editor element. This is the next thing we want to do, and preview element as I type. Hint, you need to parse Markdown yourself. You can import the marked library for this. So they're saying you don't need to be able to, you don't need to write everything that you need to, you don't need to be able to write, the specific code that makes it so that this subheading becomes this subheading. We're going to use a library for that. And don't think of this as cheating. A lot of the times in programming, what you do is actually get code from here. So they have a few ways of installing this. It looks like you can download it or you can use Cloudflare, but here's the simplest way to do it. Those CDNs just take you to a page like this. And this is just clean, raw JavaScript. And so we can just copy this. Oh, and then, I should make a note that this is just the minified version, and then this is minified even further. So I don't think that you need these folders. So I can just come over here, I'm press Command A and copy this. And now I've got this marked JavaScript library. What they're saying is you don't need to write this JavaScript library. And indeed, you shouldn't, because this is a huge project and somebody's already done it. So why would you do it? So let's see. If we come back over here and we go pwd, we see we're still in the Markdown previewer section. And if I list the files, all we have is an index. So what I want to do is create a JS folder. So I'm going to say make dir, and I'm going to say JS. So that means I've created a directory called JS. If you were to come here and look at my drop down, you'll see now there's an empty folder in the JS folder. So now what we can do is change directories into the JS, and then we say touch, and we'll call this one marked. So we're going to say marked.js. So we've created a JS folder called mark, and we're going to open marked. And now in here, we're going to paste in the code that is part of this open source project. And so now we can save this guy, and it becomes a large part of our program, right? So pwd, we see marked is there. I'm going to change directories, ... which takes me back to the main previewer. And now if we ls, we can see we've got our index here and our JS here. So now what we need to do is add the marked to our project. So I'm going to come back over to HTML, and within the head tab, I'm going to add the script tag. So here I'm going to say script source, and I'm going to set this equal to /, because that means in this folder, and then we're going to go into JS, so the folder of JS, and then inside of the JS folder we should have a file called marked.js. And then I'm going to close the script. Now before I save that, I just want to come over here and show you, if I go marked, what? It's already there? I have no idea why that worked just then. Anyways, marked is not a reference here. And now if I save this and I refresh the page and I come over here, marked, it's here. That means that there is a function behind marked, and we can use the marked things. And so because I've added it to this script file, and I've told JavaScript, or I've told the HTML document where to find that, we're able to find this guy. And then we have our marked.parser, marked.renderer, marked.everything. And so we'll be able to use this marked functions to create what we need here. Cool. So what to do next? Let's go back to our project and run the tests. We're going to see the same things aren't passing. When I enter the text into the editor element, the preview element is updated as I display the content to the text area. So let's check out marked, see if there's some documentation on this. Okay, so I just took a break to kind of build a game plan on what I'm going to do here. Basically, I stumbled around in marked trying to figure it out. And this is what I came up with. So here we can go to the GitHub page, and if we come down here, we see that they have some documentation. The documentation page. I checked out the demo page and explored around a lot. This took me a while to figure out. I didn't want to share the exact, just share with me just stumbling through the documentation. But at the end of the day, I kept looking around and I was able to find the usage. And so here, let's see, was that advanced usage? Okay, so here we have alternative using references. So the marked function, marked down string. So basically if you pass the markdown string into the marked function, you get cleaned up HTML. So alternative using references. So what I did was I just took this. Okay, so we're going to copy this. What this does is we require marked. We don't need this actually because we have marked already loaded into the page, so we don't need to require it. We set options, highlight using highlight. So this is the more complex versions of it. So I'm going to copy this, and then we're going to come back over to here. And then we're going back to our index page, and we'll write, for now, we're just going to write our script here. So within the script block, I'm just going to copy in the code that we have received from this open source project. Okay, so just trying to make sure I've got the spacing correct. Looks like this needs to be here. Console log, and this should all be one off of here. And so now if, let's say here what they're doing is saying, we're setting options. There gives us these highlight stuff. And so I'm just going to save this for now. If we console log marked to markdown string, this is probably going to give us some errors, but we can work through them. So what I'm doing is I'm importing in marked, and we're saying marked, we're setting the options, we're saying pedantic, false, sanitize. We can look later to figure out what all this means. But here we're just console logging marked, and then we've got a marked down string. But this isn't anything. So right now we'll just write hello. Or we'll just write usefulprogrammer.org. And now if I save this and I refresh this page, you'll see that the marked has rendered, it console logs out some HTML that looks like this. And so I wonder what would happen if I did some like that, if I put a pound in front of it. If I refresh, you see this shifts to H1. And so what I'm doing now is I've got marked generating. I wonder if I even need this. I'm going to comment this out and see what happens. And if I save that and I refresh, it works. Oh, okay, cool. So now that we know we've got marked working, all we need to do is, I'm going to get rid of all of that, and we're just using marked. So how would I add this code to the preview window, right? And so if I right click here and inspect, we see that we've got the danger side, which is the red background, and the markdown preview will go here. We've got our div ID of equal to preview. It's empty right now. But let's say I could go window.get element by ID, and then I can type in preview. Maybe document. Okay, cool. So if I go document.get element by ID, we get the preview. And now if we go .inner HTML, and we set that equal to a string with like h1 up close h1, we see we can enter that into here. Okay, cool. So this is the code that we need in order to do that. So let's save this as a function. So if we skip back up to here, we can call a function of update preview. And in here, we're going to say this. And right now, I've just got useful programmer in here. But soon enough, instead of having it say useful programmer, we'll have it say whatever is in this editor. So yeah, if I refresh the page now, if we were to come over here, we should be able to go preview, update, preview. That shows us that it's a function, but if we execute it, cool, useful get programmer gets entered into here. And so, yeah, now let's target this guy, right? So here we have our editor, and so we should be able to say, we can do a similar thing, document get element by ID, and then instead of preview, we can just make this editor. Okay, our editor has a text area, and with text areas, I think you can go value. And now what happens if we put an A in here? We go text editor. Okay, the value is A. Okay, cool. So we can get the value of this guy. And so we can set this, and it's equal to a string. So we can actually just set this to here. And so if we save this, and then we come back over here and refresh this page, we should be able to go useful programmer. And then here, if we go to preview, update preview, and we call the function in the console, it shows up here, which is awesome. And we don't want to just copy whatever the string of the value that is in here. We want to actually make it the marked value. So if we go marked and then we call it in here, we call the marked value on the element that is the value in the string. And so if I save this and refresh the page, I could be like, in GitHub Markdown, if you go pound, that simplifies like going for an H1. So now I could go useful programmer, and because it's getting ran through this marked function, if I go preview, update preview, and then you need to call the function, then it shows up here. But you see, this is now, if I were to inspect this, it is an H1 tag, which means that we're filling the preview with Markdown. So now it's actually working. But this isn't what we want to do, right? What we want to do is when I enter text into the editor element, the preview element is updated as I type to display the content in the text area. So one of the things, there's a bunch of different JavaScript ones that do this, but you can go on click, which would mean you would have to submit, but that doesn't work. The one that I want to use is called on key up. So for preview, I want to say on the editor, I want to say on key up. I guess I could do key press. No, let's see on key down. And then we run the update preview function. So now if I save this, every time we put a key down in the text area, we should be updating this guy. So hello. Oh, and then I need to refresh this guy. So if I go hello here, oh, cool, it works. Hi. Now that doesn't seem to work very well. So let's instead of key down, we're going to say on key up. Now if I save that, refresh the page, hello. This is Markdown for, and then we can make italicized useful programmer. Cool, and it's working. We're actually rendering this using this marked key down. So what we're doing is we're just setting, this is the document, the value of the editor, and every time our key comes up, we update our preview, in which we get the element of preview and we set it equal to whatever marked which comes out from here. And yeah, we no longer need this console log because we've got it working. So if I save this and I refresh the page, we have a pretty clean looking thing in which we're doing that. Cool. So let's run the tests and see what's happening now. All right, that passed a bunch of them. Well, we sort of did number 4 before, so I didn't do this in perfect order because I actually didn't really know exactly what I was doing when I started this. So number 4, when I entered GitHub Flavor Markdown into the editor, the text is rendered into HTML. I'm just going to clean this up really quick. So we're going to say let preview element equal this guy. And then we're going to say preview element inner HTML. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just making my code cleaner. I'm trying to make it more readable. So I'm going to take this out. I'm going to call this the editor value. And I'm going to say let editor value equal to the value, this GitHub Markdown thing. And then marked editor value just means that. And so instead of actually using this, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make the code readable. So instead of our editor value, I'm going to say marked up value, marked up string, marked up HTML. And I'm going to say let marked up HTML equal this guy. So this is a little bit more legible to me. If I were to refresh this, you'll see it works the exact same way. But now if you come back to this, if you come to this page, instead of having that big long string that's kind of confusing, you say, okay, well, they've got the preview element, they've got a editor value, and they've set that to the value of the editor, and then they've got the marked up HTML. Okay, so that we take the editor value and we run it through the marked function, and then we set the preview element equal the inner HTML of the preview element to the marked up HTML. This is just easier to read. The other way is perfectly fine. This is just I don't know, from experience, I like writing code that's a little bit cleaner to understand. So I'll keep the scripts together and then separate the title, separate the style sheet from the kind of meta information. And so, yeah. Okay, cool. A little bit of refactoring, and I'll come back over here, Markdown Previewer, run the tests. We've got that one. When my Markdown Previewer first loads, the default text in the editor should contain valid Markdown that represents at least one of each of the following elements: a header, a subheader, a link, an inline code, a code block, a list item, a block quote, an image, and a bolded text. Okay, so what we want to do then is when the Markdown Previewer first loads, the default text in the editor field should contain valid Markdown that represents at least one of each of the following elements. Okay, so what we need to do is figure out a way to say when window loads JavaScript, window.onload versus document.onload. Okay, so which one? Window.onload. By default, this is fired when the entire page loads, including its content. It's called when the DOM is ready, which can be prior to images and other external ones. So we should be able to do document.onload. So here we're going to say document.onload, and we'll set this equal to set default. And then let's go function set default, and we'll make this equal to, well, first off, we'll just say console.log default. And we'll just put a string in here, default loaded. So if I save this and I come back over to here, if I refresh this page and I inspect the element, set default, window.onload. Maybe we need to execute the function. Okay, default loaded. Okay, cool. When the default is loaded, the default loaded. So what we can do now is we can set the default on the window.onload. And so what would we do? We can make the editor value. No, we could say the editor field. The editor field is equal to, we can just copy this guy. And then we can say editor field dot, and because it's in this guy, it's going to be the value. And we're going to set that equal to, let's just say hello at first. And now if I save this and I refresh this page, cannot set property of value of null. So editor field, document dot editor. Well, I'm just saying document dot get element by ID. And then this is dot value. It's an empty string, and if we set that equal to hello, then we've got hello. So document.getElement.id editor.value. So if I save this and refresh here, it says cannot get property of value. Maybe instead of document, we just say window, see if that changes it. It doesn't, huh? Because it gets us an empty string now, and if I put an A in there, it gets us an A. So there's something having to do with the loading. Say body dot onload. Let's see if we could go set default. I wonder if we can do it like that. Say we execute the function. We'll comment this out for now. Refresh. Set default. Body.onload. Set default. Well, let's just call this let editor field is equal to this guy. And then we say edit or field. Edit or field. Value is equal to hello. Cannot set value of null. But it did work, which is strange. Editor field dot value is equal to hello. Line 25. Editor field dot value is equal to hello. Set value of null as default. It's so weird that we're getting an error, but it's working. So I'm going to just save this and then refresh this page again. It worked again. A21. Window.onload set default. Oh, okay. So instead of doing the onload thing there, we've changed the onload to the body text. So if I refresh the page, we've got hello here. Cool. And so let's go let the default text equal, and then we're going to do a multi-line HTML bit here. So we can go useful programmer Markdown previewer Previewer. And now if we refresh the page, instead of saying just putting hello in there, let's put our default text. Okay, so it looks really messed up, but we can worry about this later. Yeah, obviously it's going to need to be worried about because we want this to work. But we can worry about this later. So the default text is equal to this, and now it's rendering. This only worked because I did it. If I were to refresh the page, we have it not working. So yeah, but for now, what we can do is just get all the stuff that we need in here. When the Markdown previewer, the default text in the editor should contain the markdown that represents at least one of each of the following elements. An H1. Okay, so this is an H1. H2. H2 element for Markdown is double hash, like this. Okay, so we'll say a Markdown previewer. Okay, so we've got H1, we've got H2. A link. To do a link, we'd say the way you do that in Markdown is like this. Learn more about usefulprogrammer.org. And we can link that by saying http://www.usefulprogrammer.org. Yeah, and then that's the link. Inline code. Inline code Markdown. GitHub Markdown. Inline code. Inline HTML. I guess it's DL like this. What? You can also use raw HTML? That doesn't make any sense. Horizontal rule. Inline HTML. Well, I hope that works. Let's see here. Go back to here. A link, inline code, a code block. Let's code block. Okay, so code block's just this guy. Thank you for watching. And I think we need to add this kind of a / to exit it out because this single tab is not going to function well here. Code block, a list item. That's going to be like code all day. I'm just making stuff up because I want them in there. How do you do block quote in Markdown? Block quotes looks like it's a very long line that will stop properly. Block quote is very handy. Okay, so yeah, block quote's just this greater than sign. Learn to be a useful programmer. Okay, now we've got a block quote in there, an image, and a bolded text. Bolded text is pretty easy. I think you go bolded text like that. Bolded text, and then an image. YouTube videos, image. Okay, so in pure Markdown, it looks like this. Image alt text here. Useful programmer. And then I'm going to go to usefulprogrammer.org. See if I can find an image to throw in here. I don't have a lot of images on this page. Blog. And go with this guy from this recent project I worked on. I can just take the full size, or I can take a smaller size. I'm going to take the smaller size just because it'll be easier to work with. .jpg 600W. Edit as HTML, and then I'm going to grab this URL. You can grab any URL you want for yours. And so I'm going to fill this guy here, and then this is the link. I don't need it to be linked to anywhere. Useful programmer. Cool. So if I save that and I come back over here, nothing will happen, right? Because, well, what will happen is I've got a ton of code in here, and it's all misformatted, but worry not. We'll get it to work better later. Now, what's going on now is on our set default, we're only loading it into the editor. We want to add it to the Markdown previewer as well. We've already got the preview element set up here, and I'm just going to do it again. And so then we can go preview element dot inner HTML is equal to, because we're going to take this string and we're going to do marked default text, right? Because we're going to take the default text, but we're going to run it through marked, and then that'll give us HTML. So when we throw into the preview element the inner HTML, we should have that. Okay, so this is good. I mean, it's not great, but the cool thing about this is that we have it in here. It just needs to be rendered properly. Like right now, the string is just coming in all loopy. Yeah, because if we were to take this and clean this up, that would be perfect. So we need to figure out how to get rid of the spaces and the new lines. So I think what needs to happen is we need to push all this code so that once we get this multi-line situation going, we need to have it all functioning. So if I were to save it here, the spacing is actually a hindrance when we have a multi-line situation like this. So if I refresh the page, oh, cool, this worked. Nice. Okay, so it looks like I don't need the 600W in here. That's causing me problems. That's probably just I just want to just have this link in there, which seems to be working. Cool, so that works. Oh, looks like there's a extra bracket in there. I suppose I don't need that. Save that, refresh, okay. The bolded text is just emphasized. So it's the double asterisk is the thing that makes the world turn here. So if I save that, now we have a bolded text. Yeah, let's see if I run this. I still got 5 of 6 failing. So write some Markdown representing a code block. Okay, so I thought that this represented my code block. So this maybe that doesn't represent code block. It should have a link, inline code, and a code block. Okay, so I'm thinking this is inline code. So this is an example of inline code. And then for our bullet like, I'll just make it all really descriptive. This is an example of list item. Cool. And so now I've got a list items. This is an example of block quote. An image. This is an example of bolded text. I don't even think this works. Let me see. I'm going to refresh the page here. Yeah, I guess it does work for some reason. Markdown in HTML. Does not work very well. Oh, I see that this is just the example. I must have copied and pasted this in here. Anyways, let's save it. I'm going to refresh and pull this guy, run the tests again. Seems like, oh, the code block thing. Okay, so I think that there's this thing where you can have 3, and I'm going to need to exit. So yeah, if you do this in GitHub, you can get what's called like a multi-line code, right? Function, example of, and then we can say multi-line code block. Multi-line code block. And the reason that this isn't working is because you need to exit out of each of these in order to maintain the strings functionality. Okay, so let's refresh and see what happens. Yeah, and you can tell by the slight difference in the font here that this is an example of a multi-line code block. And if I were to inspect here, you'd see that we've got code with a PRE. So I think that that's what we're trying to get. If we run the tests. Oh, cool, it passed. When Markdown preview first loads, the default Markdown in the editor field should be rendered as HTML in preview element. Oh, right. And so we've got our last one, optional bonus. You do not need to make this test pass. My Markdown previewer interprets carriage returns and returns them as BR elements. Read marked documents for this one. Okay, this is optional stuff, so I'm not going to do that for here because I want to just make this a kind of a beginner tutorial. This is passing the tests, and this would be functional enough to pass the test by yourself. Let's see here. I want to make this look better now. That's more of a priority to me. So I'm going to come over to Bootstrap. First off, this looks terrible, so I want to come to Bootstrap. And I'm noticing there's a new line here that I want to clean up. So up here, I'm going to exit out of the first new line character here with a /. So if I save that, cool. And now we've got our, we've got a little bit cleaner looking code for all of this. This image is too big. It bounces out of the page. I don't want that. I'd rather have a cleaner image. So I wonder if there's a useful programmer image that's actually kind of small rather than just the big ones. No, okay. That's going to be okay for now. Let's see here. If I refresh the page, what I want to do is make this text area look more bootstrappy. So I'm going to come to Bootstrap. I'm going to look for text area. Okay, so it says reboot forms. Looks like they have an example of a text area here. They don't have a cool looking one though. Example text area. Is that really all they've got? Various elements should have rebooted for simpler base styles. These are some. Field set, legend, inputs. Bootstraps, text area. Forms. Let's see if I go to forms. I think that has some stuff on text area. HTML, how it works. Okay, cool. Here's what we want. Text areas. Looks like there's 19 examples. Example text area. This is what I want. Okay, so this text area is class of form control. And so let's go down here. And in here we have our Markdown previewer text area. And so we can set this a class of equal to form control. And then I also noticed that this is in a div called form group. And so I'm going to add this here because that tends to be important with these things, with Bootstrap. Okay, so now if I save this and I come back here, and I refresh the page. Cool. We have, it's filling the page and it actually looks cool. It's actually like the way the Bootstrap is supposed to look. And so that is cool. Let's see. We don't need, I guess I could keep this and say editor and previewer. Yeah, let's do that. I'm just going to make these guys H2s. Oops. And then I'm going to make this be like previewer. Previewer. And then I'm going to make this editor. And I'm going to change these so that their class is equal to text white and their text center. So they should be aligned in the middle and they'll be white and big. Editor and previewer. Cool. And I kind of want there to be margins around these. So I'm going to say a margin on the top and the bottom, which is Y, and I'm going to make it 5. And save this and see what happens. Okay, I think that's a little overkill. Let's go 3. Cool. Editor, previewer. Okay, so I just got hung up on trying to get this editor form to be full width. I want it to fill the page. And right now, whenever we reload the page, it looks like this. And that's pretty much unacceptable. So I found this as an example. I was just digging through the internet and I found this. And this is a code pen. I think I found it via Stack Overflow. And I just searched how to make a Bootstrap text area fill the page. And this is the key. So this guy right here had it working. And so what I'm doing now is I'm just deconstructing this. So I look at this, the container, the row, they've got the form here, but that doesn't matter so much to us. But here they've got what's called a deflex column. And this can actually be found on the documents here, but this guy's already got it working. So I'm just going to copy. So if you look at this column, here he has his column, right? These are all call, 12, whatever. He's got them set for each individual page. So we can add, instead of doing that, we can just add deflex column here. And then we do deflex. This is to the form group. And so we want to add this to the form group. And then finally, on the text area, he's got a flex grow 1. And we can do that here to the form group, the form control. Cool. And now if I save this, I can refresh this page. And I thought that was going to work. Okay, so where am I missing something on? Flex grow, form control, div class, form group, text area, flex column, row. So I have a content, okay, container, and then it goes to the column 12, This is that row. This is the next column. So do I have it in the right column? Background of primary. So that's right. Column of 6. Deflex. Flex column. Flex. Oh, this one, flex grow. Okay, so there's more to this form group area here. We want this flex group 1. Okay, I just had deflex and column. So I want to add flex grow 1 here. Save that. Let's see if that saves me from embarrassment. Okay, cool. And so now when we refresh the page, we have a full-sized editor. So the editor is going to match however big this is, I think. Okay, so I'm just maximizing this to the page. Now this is essentially working right now. And so it's not perfect, and I don't really, oh, this previewer has preview. We should just call that preview with no column. Cool, preview editor. And so, yeah, let's add a little bit of margins to this guy. The Markdown previewer, the background success, we could say margin. If you go MY, that means top and bottom. And if you go -3, that'll just give us some space up there so it'll look a little better. We've got our editor and a preview. And we've got the thing, everything's working. Let's see if we get rid of that. We've got the background set to green. Yeah, set this guy here, class background success, to on the body. And that just makes it so that if when people load the page and they delete everything, they can just fill it in like this. This is just basically, I'm just going to call it quits for here. Because you could get hung up on doing this forever, but basically this executes all the required tests. Oh man, when the Markdown preview first loads, the default text should have this. It should have an H2 element. It doesn't have an H2 element? Oh, if you run the tests after you delete it, then it doesn't work. I'm not going to do this because, yeah, I think that's bonus material. You can get that on your own if you want. This is essentially passing the test. And so I'm going to close all this other stuff, closing marked, closing the example, I'm closing the Bootstrap documentation, I'm closing the marked CDN stuff, closing all the things. And now what I'm going to do is open up GitHub. This is the publishing part of this project. And so the first thing I'm going to do now is we're going to say ls and pwd. So right now we're in our Markdown previewer. And so what I want to do now is publish this to the internet. And so I'm going to use Git and GitHub pages to do that. To do that, I need a open window where I'm logged in. So I can go to github.com. I'm already logged into GitHub, but if you're not logged into GitHub, you'll want to do that now. And I'm going to create a new repository in GitHub. So once you log in, you click this star button, you click new repository. And I'm going to call this one Markdown Previewer by Useful Programmer. Yeah, and so I'm going to say I'm going to call it Markdown Previewer, part of the free code camp curriculum. Cool. And so this is going to create a new repository on GitHub. I can create this repository. And now that I've created it here, it shows you quick setup. If you've done this kind of thing before, you can just do this, or create a new repository on the command line, or push an existing repository to the command line. That's what we want to do. And so in order to create an existing repository, we want to come here and make sure that we're in the right one. So I'm on my desktop. If I go pwd, I'm on my desktop. The folder, which is a Markdown previewer, is right here on my desktop. And if I go git init, that causes an initialized Git repository. And so now that I've done the git init, I want to push my changes here. So right now I'm coming over here. I'm going to say git status. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you guys. So if you see, I did git status here. And then the status is that there's a new index and a new JS file. And so what I want to do is go git add, and I want to add everything. And so now if I go git status, you'll see it's green. It says that I've added these two files, and we want to add those to the project. So we're saying git commit. So we're committing here. Add the index file. Add marked JS. Initialize git repository. This is just a message. You don't have to write this out at all. You could just say start or whatever, but I like to make specific git commit messages. And so now we've committed this change locally. What we want to do now is push the changes to our remote. And so git remote add, I'm going to come over here. And so now we're adding the remote of this git here. And so I'm going to say git remote add origin, this guy. And so now if I go git remote -v, you'll see that it has our GitHub git URL here. And so now I can say git push -u origin master. And this will push the code up to this new GitHub repository. So now that that's done, if I refresh this page, it's alive. And that's really good news. Now, let's go over to settings. And if you've watched me do these videos before, you know exactly how this is going to work because it's the same for each of our projects. But I scroll down to GitHub Pages. It's designed to host your personal organization or project pages from GitHub repository. And in here, I want to select the source and select master branch as the source. So it says GitHub Pages. As soon as you click that drop down, it saves for you. And if you scroll down to that page, you'll see that there is a link. And right now, if I open this link in a new tab, it does not show anything. Don't get worried about that. It just takes a while to actually reflect itself on the internet. But in the meantime, what we can do is go back to the code page. Now, most GitHub projects have a README. And the way that you make a README is you just add one to your project. So let's add one to ours. So I'm going to say touch, which means start a new file, and then readme.md. You want to have it capitalized. That's the way everybody does it. So now I'm going to go open -a Atom. So I'm opening with the application of Atom, the README. And then in here, I can say, I can just give this one a quick little Markdown previewer by Useful Programmer. I'm going to make this a heading tag. You can see it live by clicking here. And then here, I'm going to say, I'm going to make this a link. This is just standard GitHub Markdown. And what I want to add in this link is the URL that we found on the settings page. So if you scroll down, you'll see your site is published at this guy. And so I'm going to go back to my README file. Oops. Go back to my README file and say, put it in here, and I'm going to save this. Okay, so now I've got my GitHub Markdown, and I've saved it locally. So now I'm going to do the same process I did last time. Now, right now, you'll notice that if we go to code, there's no README in here. But if we come over here, we can say git status. We see that the README needs to be committed. So I'm going to say git add. And now if I go git status, you don't have to do git status. I'm just trying to show you the process. It says we've added the new README file. So now I'm going to say git commit because my changes are staged. And I'm just going to say add README. The message is unimportant. Commit-m means the message. So once I've committed the change, then I can push it. And since I've already set the remote to be GitHub, all I have to do is say git push. Cool. And so now if we look back on GitHub and I refresh the page here, you'll see that the Markdown previewer for use by Useful Programmer is there, and you can see it live by clicking here. And so if I click here, it's still not there. But this will show up in time. Unless I screwed up with the URL. I hope not. There we go. Cool. So now it's live. That just takes a while to reflect, so you shouldn't be worried about that either. And so we have everything working. And so now, yeah, the cool thing right now is you've got this live on the internet. So if you're wanting to check my work, you can actually click this. You can visit this URL and visit it. So yeah, I'm going to pull open my other window. I consider this done now. So I'm going to get out of my personal window. And I'm going to go back to the front-end libraries project. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to add my solution here. And so I'll say I completed the challenge. And that is the front-end libraries project. I could go crazy with this. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of things like if somebody was just to arrive like this, it would look like this. It's not ideal. There's definitely things that could be improved upon. But the bottom line is you could go forever working on these projects and just keep improving them, but you're just making a GitHub, like a Markdown previewer. That's not something you really, really need to do with your life. So it's good to just kind of get them to a point where they're complete. You've got the project understood, and it looks good enough to show that you're making progress with your coding. So that's basically where we're at with that. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and thank you for watching.